Hopefully that's what everyone's expecting today. So I'm Mark Foy, I'm AFA's Associate Director of Professional Standards, and I've got with me Josie today, if you want to say hello.
Hiya, I'm Josie Browning. I am part of a member of the Professional Development Committee.
So thanks for all coming along today. So quite an informal session. This is the kind of Q&A session. So I've got a few slides that we'll go through to kind of answer some kind of high level questions and just give a very, very quick overview of the process. And then it will really be open for any questions that you want to ask, no matter what stage you're at, whether you just want to find out a little bit more, whether you've maybe started and you need a bit of refinement, or you know what, maybe you've got your paperwork done and submission window is now open, you just want a final little sense check or a bit of advice from there. So we'll kind of keep it informal. Shout out, stick your hand up, use the chat. We'll answer questions in any which way they come. For those of you who don't know my voice normally, it doesn't normally sound like this. I am struggling to talk a little bit today, so the more you guys talk, the better. And I'm sure Josie can bail me out if my voice starts to fail. As I say, this is the Q&A workshop, so we do run a quarterly introduction workshop as well, which the full hour goes into detail with the process. I'll now do that bit of magic where I plug our AFA YouTube channel where we record them, and it will appear in the chat. But again, if you do want to watch over them, full session there, walks through every step. Again, we'll do a bit of a high level run through today, but more time for questions than normal. So just one of the common questions is kind of why you do this really, and there's no kind of single answer to that, despite the fact there's 5 bullet points on that slide there. People's reasons are their own and motivations are their own from there. These are some of the common ones that we come across here. Again, a real kind of validation of your skills and knowledge, and that kind of independent review of kind of who you are and kind of what you do as an analyst. Just as I mentioned analyst there, I do mean the analyst family, whether it's data engineering, data science, and the kind of umbrella. For ease and time, we'll refer to it as analyst, but we're not just talking kind of information analyst, data analyst from there. The last one there, again, it's your career, your development. At the minute, although the bottom bullet point there does talk about soon to become a requirement, which is starting to come out now, that it's been completely voluntary. You'll all be aware there's lots of other professions, finance, workforce, HR ones, a more long-standing history of professional registration. For analytics and informatics, it is still relatively new, although now starting to become a requirement for the senior leaders. So again, that may have prompted some of you to come along today. I will just throw over to you, Josie, at this point. Is there anything you want to reflect on for kind of motivations or why to do it?
Nothing that specific, I suppose. I mean, I've been a registered analyst myself for 7 years now. I was one of the first. So the process has changed, but it's definitely worthwhile. It's certainly served me well having gone through the process and registered. It's has supported my career and my development and opened opportunities to me. Just a bit of personal reflection there, if that helps.
Yeah, no, fantastic. I think definitely kind of what I probably seen in myself and others is a real confidence boost to kind of belong to that community and know that you have the backing of a profession behind you, and definitely useful for careers as well, to show that that's how serious and you take your career. So again, fantastic that you've come along today to find out a little bit more. So I'm going to do a very quick run through the process now. But again, we'll take questions as we go along, or there'll be time for questions at the end. So in terms of what you need to do, think about your level, and I'll talk a bit more about the levels from there, but it goes from affiliate up to leading. I've got a good slide in a bit which shows the difference between the two, which is a common question. What we do say as well is please only submit the kind of official paperwork from there. A lot of kind of what you might have done in terms of dissertations or qualifications is all great evidence. But in order to kind of assess that, there is a step paperwork that we do, which again I'll talk through now, and that's all available on the FedIP Hub website. In terms of getting access to that, so that form on the right hand side is on the AFA website. Basically click on that if you've not got a FedIP account ever already, and there it is. It's appeared in the chat if you haven't got that link to the hub. Asks you to create an account. It does ask you to pick a level there. don't worry at this stage, you're not locked into that level. So you can pick whichever, and there's still an opportunity to change the level later on. And then what we ask for is application form, some reflective practices, and your evidence, which we're going to talk through in a minute. For those of you who've already been through the process, it's the same one for if you're revalidating or reaccrediting. Slightly condensed form for that one if you're staying at the same level. If you are increasing level, it's the same as starting from scratch from there. But again, all the forms, all the information on the AFA website, and complete that form to get onto the FedIP. One of the forms we also house on the website is this one. This is just a snippet of it, but really good view for how the levels differ from there. I've just done practitioner to leading. Associate is a kind of very entry level version. It's more of a commitment to kind of go through the full process at a later date, really. So that one's more focused on just a bit of evidence of CPD and kind of relevance of your role. But practitioner is where the kind of main standards up to leading from there. A common question we get from this point is, what level should I apply at? There's no hard rules. It's not linked to job titles. It's not linked to pay bands whatsoever. It is just where you pitch yourself, where your skills and experience land on this. So if you're to open this document, you can kind of read through the levels and just kind of see where you think you land, and then go for that level where you think actually this is where the majority of where you've kind of self-assessed yourself to from there. What I would say again at this, there's no right or wrong. It's about what you think you can best evidence at this. What might happen is when you do submit your assessment, if maybe you feel you've stretched a little too far or evidence is lacking in some, your assessor will 100% kind of work with you to refine that. It's not a kind of black box submission process where you send something off and never hear anything back. If there's anything a bit borderline, or we feel there's something missing, if maybe you've pitched it at advanced but you've maybe not hit everything, they'll feed that back. Likewise, maybe you've applied at senior, but actually the strength of your evidence application was more advanced. Your feedback will be actually great piece of work, and we're going to move you up a level from there. So think more about what you can evidence rather than thinking, right, I'm now pigeonholed in a box from here. Josie, anything you want to add about kind of choosing the right level?
No, I think you've covered that all, Mark. It is very much up to you and what your skills and experience are, and where you're currently doing. A lot of this will be shown through your reflective practice, which we'll come on to. So I think maybe before you specifically pick a level, you might want to write out a reflective practice first and then see where it fits. That might give you a guide into where you're aiming if you're struggling to decide between two, for example.
Yeah, really good point in that, because a reflective practice is a reflective practice regardless of the level, really. So great bit of advice there to kind of make a start and then see where you think you pitch it from there. Just in terms of some of the evolution of these, again, you can read through this and get a feel for it, but again, practitioner, largely responsible for yourself, and kind of working within established methods and frameworks. Senior and advanced, obviously a bit more freedom, maybe now a bit more responsibility for others, and then leading from there is where you're responsible for departments, or writing strategy or writing policy from there. So although there's no hard definition of bands and job titles, again, you will feel a natural kind of affinity to one of these depending on the roles you do. And I'll probably come back a lot today. It's all about what you can evidence and what you do is the key thing from this. Just going to quickly flash up the standards on screen. I'm not going to read through these next two slides in detail, but it's just to give you a flavour for what the 9 standards are, and then the little bit of bullet points there of what we're looking for within each level. Again, all this is on the website and on the application forms, so it's fresh in your mind through there. What you'll probably notice from the guidance points, it's very much about kind of how and why you did stuff rather than what you did. This isn't a registration or an accreditation of kind of your approach to work, not your output. We're not looking for the most polished, amazing dashboard or script or anything like that. It's about why you did something at the time and why you felt that was the the best course of action at the time. It's the journey we're interested in rather than the output. The output will very much be evidence, which we'll come on to in a bit, but we want to know, what makes you tick, why you made those decisions to get to that point. So that's standards 1 to 5. I'll just flick over to 6 to 9 there and leave it on screen for a second, and I will grab a quick drink.
That's okay. I was just responding to a question in the chat. About what happens if you apply for one level but are considered more suitable for another. You won't have to repeat the full application process. Very much your assessor will work with you. They'll probably reach out by email, so do respond to them, and they'll either help you to get to prove to come up to the level where you've applied if your application's sitting a little bit lower, or we will make the decision, our professional development committee, where we sign off all of the applications to award a higher level, and you won't be required to resubmit on the other set of forms, but that will get documented within our processes.
Fantastic. Yeah, so they're the kind of high level summary of the standards, and that's what we're looking for you to evidence and reference in your reflected practice. If there's no questions on the standards, I'll move us on to the application form. There will be loads of time for questions at the end, so don't worry if nothing's there now. So 3 things you will submit: evidence, reflected practice, and application form. So application form is a relatively standard form. For those of you who may have looked at this over the years, I think it probably began life as about a 40-50 page document, maybe with a whole load of stuff. It's now probably down to probably less than 10, actually, but definitely in single digits from there. So the professional development committee done a lot of work to really streamline and make this as easy and accessible for people as possible. So the first bit we ask you to do is just a little bit about yourself. Not looking for War and Peace here, just a paragraph just for the assessor to get a bit of a flavour for who you are. Again, this is not a time to be modest or shy about your achievements. So second box down, anything you've done, any papers published, presentations, awards you've won, conference talks, whatever. Tell us about it. We'd love to hear all those good news stories. That's the reason we put that at the top. A little bit on qualifications, again, just institutions, subjects in years. We're not modules or any more detail of what the content is from there. And similar for career history, again, a sentence or 2 on each kind of relevant post. Again, no set kind of requirement for how long this covers. 2, 3, 4 recent jobs. Again, this is just for the assessor to understand your history and who you are really from there.
Yeah, I was just going to say that needs to be sort of relevant roles to your analytic career history. So if you worked in Costa while you're at uni, we don't need to know about that. You don't need to go quite that far. It's not a job application form.
Yeah, that's it. It's just to understand who you are, exactly.
Yeah, it gives us context when we're assessing your application, because we don't know most of you, so helps us to form a picture.
And then there's a section on the form for additional information relating to the standards. So this is kind of a new addition, but this is part of the reason why we're able to condense the form so much. So your reflected practice is where you evidence you meet these standards. But we know not all kind of reflected practice, or I'll call them stories, will kind of go to plan, or they'll hit every standard as much as they do. You tell us about a project you've done, and that's great, but there might be a standard that you feel you've not done justice to, or you maybe briefly referenced it but didn't get to much detail. So this is just the opportunity to go, actually, standard 8, demonstrating professionalism. Here's a paragraph, 2 paragraphs of how I do that from there. So again, useful to mop up anything that you don't feel you've covered in detail from there. I'll come on to the matrix on the application form in a little bit. That's the really good place to see, have I ticked off everything? There might be something that you've not ticked off. So again, this is your opportunity to kind of beef up your evidence and your application from that. And then the other bit, I've not spoke too much about this in the standards, but are the contextual standards, and these are kind of underpinning threads around kind of how your role fits in with the organization and what kind of value you bring from here. So these are 6 standards. One about understanding your role, how you communicate, how you work with others, and then a couple there around GDPR and information governance from there. So again, this is something that may not always naturally fall into reflective practice. So again, this is an opportunity to provide a bit more information. And again, you can see from this example here, the cells have been merged and it's a couple paragraphs to explain how they cover both. Any questions on the application form before I move on to reflective practice? Again, probably done these in not the best order because, as Josie said, reflective practice might have been a great place to start, but we'll start with application form. So for reflective practice, we use a STAR model, so looking for you to tell us situation, task, actions, and results. Again, I've put a bit of the information on there. So again, just for those who aren't familiar with that. So again, why this piece of work came about, what was the context? When we talk about tasks, this is more about the planning ahead from it. So yeah, what was the problem or challenge you overcome, or what were you going to do to overcome that, to change something, to do something, to respond to the request or whatever it may be. Actions, probably one of the more self-explanatory ones, but actually, what did you do? What did it take? Why did you do that? What happened? Which then leads into the results. Yeah, what was the outcome? What went well? What didn't? I'm sure it's all a roaring success in the examples you might talk about, but that's not to say actually sometimes the best examples are when they have ended in unmitigated disaster, and that's when a lot of reflecting can take place. Wanted to do this, planned to do this, would have been great if I could do this, didn't quite work out for reasons. This is what I would have done differently next time to make it better. Again, we're not looking at the output, we're looking at your thought process and decision making process as to why you've done the stuff. So yeah, it doesn't matter if it wasn't as good as you hoped. As long as you recognize that, it's great reflection. And I'll just flip over to what a reflective practice will look like. So this is one of the examples that we walk through on the intro session. So the session that we've put the link in, that's on YouTube. We'll walk through kind of how we build up a reflective practice. So this is the output of that. And this was for a piece of analytical work supporting a frailty service. So you can see from this one, they set out the situation. You'll notice in the red and the blue ink from there, that's when they've started to label what standards they've hit. So again, a simple sentence as to I was asked to join a team as the analyst to support this project. Again, shows how you work with others. And then for evidence there, they've shared the invite email that said, actually, how can you work with this? Such a very simple thing. But that's how you start to evidence and accumulate kind of hitting these standards from there. And evidence can be as simple as, hi, Mark, can you come to this meeting to help us with this? You know, it's the context of why you're doing that. And you can talk a bit more about, you know, what your skills and what your role is from there. So that builds up around, you know, how they kind of got some understanding. They then planned out what their tasks were going to be. Again, constantly referencing the standards they hit. They said they were going to write some SQL scripts, and then they've shared evidence of that script. And they were going to need to speak to some people. So, you know, they've spoke about how they've worked with colleagues, and again, shared evidence of those charts and chats from that. Then the actions, what they've done. So they spoke about courses they've attended. They've shared examples of, or said they wrote the script, and again, shared examples of that. They were going to take some pivot tables and create some charts. Again, all stuff that will resonate with everyone on this call. So much. What's probably the hard thing is really kind of breaking it down to those micro steps and micro decisions that you'll just instantly do. Somebody asks you for a bit of information, or you set out to do a work. These kind of steps will all go through your head, but they'll just be instant, and you'll go off and do it. So that's probably one of the harder things, is to slow it down and talk through each individual step you do, which I'm sure will come naturally to everyone on this call. And the last box there was just again talking about the results. So they said they presented it, they got some feedback. Hopefully some of you all got some nice collection of feedbacks and thank yous and well dones from people. Always good to save them and share them as well. and they've attached an example of an agenda again. So the outcome was they're now presenting this monthly. They've shared the agenda to show that from there. And then the second part of the reflective practice is where we get into some bit more deeper reflecting now, but we do love reading these because it is about the true reflection about what went well, what went less well, what you learn, what would you do differently next time. As I say, we're not looking for an output, we're looking for that journey. Josie, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I was just going to say this part's like equally as important as the first page. So don't skimp on this one because this really helps us to understand what you learned from the process, and it shows us how you've grown as an analyst by doing that piece of work. I find as a assessor, I find this page really important to understand what the actual outcomes were. Other than you made a report and everyone liked it, this is sort of the main outcomes for you as an individual and how you're professionally developing over your work.
Yeah, completely agree. It's often where you find the most honesty and some of the most insight from the task. Okay, just going to do a very, very quick run through evidence now. I've just got a few screenshots of things to flag up. A classic one everyone goes to, which people don't struggle with, is sharing scripts and screenshots of Excel files and whatnot. Again, we're not assessing the quality of your code at this point or how good your visualization is, because you're going to tell us, why you've chosen to do that, and that's as long as the steps you took to do it. That's what you're covering are fine. It's not, oh, I wouldn't have done that, I want to do that. We're not technical assessors. It's why you used it. So this is more just an example to probably more so to prove it was you, or no, to prove it's here's my script, I did this. Put it in big letters on the right hand side there. Screenshots are all we require for this. One probably just for storage space as well, but definitely not for sharing any patient identifiable information. So if you Excel will be a classic one for this. Yeah, you want to share something you've made, you upload the file as evidence. Yeah, please, just screenshots for that. We don't want any patient data flying around.
Yeah, make sure you don't leave all the data attached if it's connected to your warehouse kind of Excel file, because it can be in the back and not visible. So just yeah, as Mark said, a screenshot is perfectly adequate for us to see that you've made a nice Excel file or a pretty graph.
Yeah, it's just to help us with that. Like, I keep calling them stories, that reflective practice, but as an assessor, we'll read the reflective practice, you'll reference an evidence, we'll go and look at the evidence. Again, it's just to get the feel and the extra kind of context for your story. Again, we're not critiquing your script, your dashboard from that. So that's an obvious one that a lot of people do. The one I've mentioned, which some people overlook because they feel it's probably not that major, or they think, oh, I'll share my dashboard, I'll share my script. But yeah, minutes, meetings, agendas, if you go into committees to present stuff, or you're being asked to support stuff and you've got those minutes, really great evidence. This could also include screenshots of calendar invites, screenshots of Teams chats. Obviously, there's lots of different ways to communicate with people nowadays. Don't kind of overlook the kind of softer evidence as to those little chats or those little bits of why you're doing that. It could even be, oh, hi Josie, do you mind checking my script for me to make sure it's okay? Josie emails back, fantastic script, Mark, best I've ever seen. That's what we're looking for from there. Little bit fuzzy, this example, sorry, but that's exactly what this one is. This is somebody emailing the clinical coding team to request some ICD-10 codes. Again, if you're an analyst, this could be emailing your data engineering team, asking where some tables are, asking where some fields are from there. Again, it shows you're stopping to think, you're consulting with others, you're getting advice on your work as the best way to proceed from there. And then once you've done all that, this is evidence matrix on the application form. This is purely for your own use as a checkpoint, although the assessor will look at it to make sure you've ticked everything. But this is your checklist to go, okay, have I covered every standard and where have I covered it? And then they've referenced the evidence as well. So again, makes it nice and easy for an assessor to go, okay, this person feels they've covered everything. They've covered this standard in that one, this in that one, this in that one. If you've got blank boxes, then this is your chance now to go back. What can you tweak? Have you missed something out your reflective practice? Or do I need to use the additional information in the application form, which is exactly what we've done on this example here. So that's actually standard 8 demonstrating professionalism. They didn't manage to cover this in any reflective practices. So they've uploaded some evidence and they've said application form is where I've covered this off from there. You don't need to cover every standard with every reflective practice as long as every standard is covered with evidence in one way or the other. We do ask for a minimum of 3 reflective practices. Feel free to do 4 if you want as well. It's about what you, or 4 or 5. It's about covering the standards from there. What most people find is the first reflective practice might cover maybe 80-90% of the standards, and then your second and third one you might tailor to cover something else, or actually it might be 4 kind of very specific reflective practices that cover different aspects from there. But again, really good matrix to, if you fill this in and you've got no blanks in it, or you've got everything covered, really good application, or you've hit that minimum requirement that at least I've referenced everything from there. And then last little bits on the application form, which just prompt a few questions sometimes. So we ask you for a sponsor. This doesn't need to be a line manager. It's just somebody who can verify what you've said is true, in essence. So peers are fine. Maybe someone you used to work with. I'll come on to kind of moving roles in a little bit as well. But yeah, it's just anyone who can verify. Somebody did ask me once if it has to be a manager, because I think they had some serious reflecting to do. So it's like, no, don't worry. It doesn't have to be a manager if you don't want them to see it from there. And then the last bit is, if you already work with somebody who's professionally registered, they can verify your evidence and kind of sponsor you, kind of like vouching for you from there. So it does mean there's no requirement to upload the evidence, because you'll have shown it to your sponsor and they will have reviewed it. They'll sign it to say, I've checked Mark's work. As somebody who's already registered, yes, this is really good. They've covered everything from there. Again, you've still got to do it, or you've still got to show the sponsor. But again, it makes it a lot easier for the assessor, knowing that somebody who's been through the process has seen it. Josie?
The only thing I was going to mention on this one is if you're having your evidence verified, I mean, even if you're not, when you fill in the matrix or when you reference your evidence through your reflective practice, if you can give your evidence each piece a name rather than just E1, E2, it helps the assessor that doesn't then get to see your evidence know what you've submitted. So you might have evidence 1 and that it's an email, or evidence 2 and it's a SQL script, just so that we can see the types of evidence that you've shown your sponsor. Just helps us with contextualizing what you shared.
Definitely. There's absolutely no harm in making life easier for the assessor, and I'd probably encourage it for selfish reasons. Okay, last little slide I'm just going to share, and then we'll open up for any questions that we've not covered. Some kind of points that often come up in these that we've kind of compiled together. The first one is how long does it take, which is a really difficult question. It's so personal about how you work and how you find this type of work. Some people hear the word reflection and think, oh God, that's not me. I can't do that. I don't know what to do. Haven't got the time. Definitely would recommend kind of carving out some time from this, whether that be annual leave, weekends or evenings, or again, if you're able to, within working hours from there. Again, this is your registration, not your employer's. So, but definitely do look to see where you can work the time from that. What I would say from kind of my own personal view is I spent most of my time staring at a blank piece of paper with not much happening. And then once I kind of started, it all went really fast from there. And that might have taken me a couple of days overall, with probably half the day of doing nothing whatsoever. Again, it will depend how you work throughout the year. You may already have kind of portfolios or evidence of stuff. You may, when we've been talking about reflective practices, have an example that you think, oh my God, that'll be amazing, I'll use that. Again, it doesn't need to be big major pieces of work. So the one we talked through in the intro session is I'm going to call it a basic ad hoc, but it was a request for information how you support a project. So we're not talking dissertations, massive projects here. Just kind of how you can evidence those standards is all we're talking about from there. We spoke about thinking about those chunky pieces of work. I say a lot of people do find that your first example is your best one. It's the one that's jumped to mind. So again, you might be able to tick off quite a lot in that first run and then cover off any others in further pieces. Yeah, when they said about using additional reflective practice, again, you can use the additional information or an extra reflective practice if, again, you feel you've not done something justice. I've called reflective practice a story, and that is in essence what we want you to do, is just tell us a story of how you did that piece of work, why you did it, the journey you took, what the outcome was. So I do find that's the best way to think about this is and then those little micro steps of that story is what a reflective practice is. Get a lot of questions around if you've moved jobs or changing jobs. The key question is, what can you evidence? So if you've moved jobs and you've now not got access to anything to evidence it, then that will be a struggle, because again, we need the evidence from there. But if you feel you've got enough to still evidence it and you no longer work there, that's the evidence is the key. To the second point, there's no kind of time limit on this. I spoke about leading before, leading practitioner, and that was, writing strategies, writing policies. They don't come around every year. So again, if you last wrote a major strategy 3-4 years ago, it might be due for refresh.
Your sound's cutting out, Mark. I don't know if it is for anybody else. It's just a bit. I don't think it's just your voice. I think you've just gone a bit hit and miss. No, you're a little bit fuzzy. Do you want me to? So the Mark was saying about the time limit. So we don't have a hard time limit on what you submit, but to ensure that your continuing professional development is evident, then examples should be recent. So you probably don't want anything that's too old, but within the last few years, just to show that you are continuing to develop within your post. But yeah, there's no hard and fast rule around that, but so long as you can evidence it and it's fairly recent, you'll be okay. Then we've got about making sure you've evidenced the standards and not just the reflective practice points. So if, for example, you've written your piece of reflective practice about making a really cool dashboard in like pediatrics, we don't want you to just evidence what you've said in the reflective practice, but you need to make sure that your evidence covers those standards, so that's why we need you to include like the emails, the meeting minutes, agendas, that kind of thing, because it shows that you've then presented that dashboard and taken on feedback about it, because it's the standards that you're evidencing, not your reflective practice. That's the kind of the key point there. And I think we get asked a lot about is, and certainly it comes back to that, how long it takes and stuff, this is your registration. So it's you personally registering as an analyst. It's not about your current job. It's not about your employer. It's your personal decision to do this process and register an analyst, and it will help your job and your career, but it's not on your employer. It's on you. And I think even though it is going to be mandated in the future, I think it's still on the individual to go through the process and to do this.
If I come back in on that, Josie,
yeah.
Is that better? Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Again, so obviously at the minute there's a lot of kind of movement with jobs and kind of national uncertainty around roles as well. So again, if you're between jobs or if you've just moved, again, it's still you can still apply, or you don't have to stop becoming registered because you're not working for a period as well. So again, please share this with any colleagues who are kind of going through this process at the minute. But again, as long as you can still evidence it, and as long as you still plan to work in that analyst field and industry within healthcare, just because you move jobs or you're in between jobs, or that might be coming up in the future. That's not a blocker to apply, or you won't be struck off the register if you're not working. Again, as long as you're as long as you still want to be, and you plan to get a job in the future, still working in analytical healthcare, then it's completely, as Josie said, it's your registration. It's not linked to your current job, whatever that might be at the minute. Right, I'll carry on now again. Thank you.
No, you're back.
I've covered the last couple already, but again, just to really reiterate, it's an open communication process. I'll put it bluntly. We want you to pass. We will support you as much as we can to pass. So don't feel that you submit something, you never hear anything, or you just get a rejected back. We will talk to you. We will support you. We will say, we will be quite descriptive at some point to say, we don't feel you've hit standard 7. If you could give an example of this, that would kind of really help. That's what we're looking for from there. So, and do reach out as well. Again, we'll open for questions in a minute. Kind of, what's the saying? Don't let perfection be the enemy of something. But we want you to open that.
Progress.
We'd much that's the word. That's the thing. Yeah. We'd much rather you kind of start that application process, reach out to us, speak to us, and then we can kind of help you through from there as well. And then the final point, obviously we do support teams to go through this process. So it might be a similar session to this where one of us might come just to talk to your team to go through it from there. That will naturally lead to a lot of kind of bleeding of stories and responsibilities with what you evidence. There's nothing wrong with that as such, but just make sure you are talking about your involvement in the process. But yeah, don't feel if you're going through as a team that either you can't talk about the same thing, and you can't just submit one for the team. It's got to be, if there's 5 in your team, we do want 5 applications, and make sure you're talking about your specific involvement, not just all 5 of you submitting the same story. Because it'll be really hard to tell what was you. And again, back to that point, this is your registration, not your team's registration. Josie, any final points that you can think to flag before we open up?
No, I think that's covered it. I think we've currently got one hand and one question in the chat.
Okay, right, I'll bring the slides down, and I can't see who's got their hand up, but if you want to come in.
Shaheen, do you want to come in?
Yes, hi, this is Shaheen. So this might be a silly question, but I just want to understand, how does this professional registration add value to my career when I already, or someone has already have a formal, master's or PhD? How does this add value to my career?
So your formal master's or your PhD shows that you've studied to that level, and I'm guessing it's within relative specialism. What this does, what your professional registration does, is it shows that you're working to that level and you're working to those standards, and that's why we have alignment with things like the National Competency Framework, because your job role may say you need to do these things, and what professional registration does is it says I've evidenced that I can do these things and I work in this way and I work within sort of the AFA code of conduct. So it adds that professional accountability, that you're taking accountability for your work, you're working within standard guidelines. That adds a little bit more weight to your CV as well, I feel, especially with the national mandate coming down, that certainly from the most senior roles next year, that people will be required to be professionally registered to be certainly within the DDAT family.
So does this apply only for NHS and things like that, roles within NHS, or?
So predominantly it's aimed at NHS, but we don't exclude other people. We don't exclude other organisations. We have members and people that are registered from overseas organisations. What it is tied to is healthcare and social care. So you've got to be working in that kind of environment, certainly in an analytics or a data engineering type role. So if you went and worked in banking, for example, then it wouldn't really apply because you're not working in the healthcare sector anymore.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from anyone?
Do you mind taking the one in the chat, Mark, from Jeddah Solar? Apologies if I'm pronouncing that wrong.
Yeah, sorry, just going now. So I'm new to AFA process and still finding my way around. Yeah, so I think, I don't know if you can see the chat history. So I think we've put
Let's put some links in, haven't we?
some links in there to the website where all the standards are, and then the recording to the intro session where we talk through that process in there. So again, I'd familiarize yourself with them, have a look at the forms and kind of what's on the website. And again, if you've got any further questions from there, I'm going to get Lizzie to put the email address in the chat, info@AFA-analysts. But again, if you've got any questions that those forms and links haven't answered, then that's the best point of call for, there we go, for reaching out once you've, if you've got any more specific questions.
Julie, you've asked a question about what about people like you who are self-taught and have no formal education. Having no formal education doesn't exclude you from this process, so long as you're working in a related role and you're working to the standards. That doesn't mean that you can't apply to be professional registered. Having a degree or a higher education is not a requirement for professional registration. So don't let that put you off.
No, absolutely. Again, it's about what you can evidence, and this is about you working to those standards regardless of education. So again, for your experience, your skills that you've developed, that's exactly what we want you to tell us about.
Did you have a follow-up question? I can see you come off mute.
Thank you.
Is that okay, Julie? Sorry, it's a bit quiet then.
Yes, I said thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've been an analyst for about 15 or 16 years, so
yeah, just apply. You know, it doesn't matter that you haven't gone to uni.
I was on one of the very first AFA qualification courses.
I
think I was cohort 2.
Brilliant.
Well done.
Well done.
Okay, got another one from Ranjita. So would it be suitable for data engineers, or would BCS be more aligned? Yes, again, think about the standards and where you feel you sit. BCS are still part of the Fed IP standard. So I'm not gonna, even though we're on AFA call, I think we are recording, but we're gonna edit this bit out. But actually, if BCS does feel more appropriate, that's fine. We do get lots of applications from data engineers though as well. The standards do work, and obviously BCS do use the same standards with slightly different wording of guidance from there. So what I would recommend for that is to go through the guidance, read them, see what you think you can evidence, and then from there, if you feel the AFA ones maybe don't hold too true for what you can evidence, depending on what your role, because obviously data engineering, there's lots of different specialisms within that. Again, do reach out to that inbox if you think actually I'm not too sure, we can answer those questions. And again, but also then do the same for BCS. Go and look at their forms and their paperwork and see does that lend itself for you. But no, definitely does work for data engineering.
Yeah.
And that wider family too. We've had clinical code and data quality kind of go through this. It's all about, as long as you are working with data in some way and you can evidence it, you'll find that you can hit the standards, no problem.
Hannah's asked about past employment, Mark, and whether it needs to be linked directly to healthcare or is an analyst specific role sufficient?
Yeah, so we will be looking for healthcare related, really. I suppose though, I'm just thinking if you learnt a skill in a past role and then applied that in your current role, which is healthcare, then that's fine. But if your example was purely in an old job and nothing had been linked to healthcare, then no, that wouldn't be sufficient. But
No.
the challenge I'd probably lay to you is to, what you may have learned from previous roles, link that into your current healthcare role.
And then the last one we've got in the chat currently is from Sarah, which says, if we're unsure of which level to apply, is it better to apply to the lower or the highest level we think we're suitable for?
Again, no right or wrong answer for this,
No.
really. We will feedback and support you on either way for that. So, and it will be honest, kind of the best feedback to do this. So actually, if you've gone too high and you're not suitable, and let's just say you've massively overreached, and actually if there's a couple tweaks here and there, we might say do this, do that. That'll be enough. But actually, if we think it's quite far away, we'll say actually you might be best doing this. And there'll be, as Josie said before, there'll be no extra work from that. We wouldn't say scrap it and start again. We can adapt and tweak it to each one from there. So again, I keep coming back to the point of just feel which one you can evidence best, really, about what you think is stronger, and kind of take it from there, really. But again, we will support you with that.
So that was your question about being new to AFRA and the process. I think Mark's answered that. If you need any more direction, or if you can't get to the links earlier in the chat, just drop an email to that info@AFRA analysts email address. That's also in the chat a little bit further up. Hopefully you've heard that. If not, I will just pop a response here as well.
Okay, I'll keep going for a little bit, just if any more questions pop into people's heads just while you are. I think we've been a few bits in the chat about registration windows. So they open every quarter. So the current one opened on the 1st of April, closes on the 30th of April. And then the next one will open on 1st of July, 1st of October, 1st of January, and so on from there. So again, depending where people are up to, I mean, today may be the very first time you've looked at it, and you might think 2 weeks is a quick turnaround time, which is perfectly fine. So again, July will be the next window from there. That's not to say you can't start it. You can work on this at any point during the year, just to help with assess allocation and to help with the timeliness we ask from every quarter. But feel free to start today and submit on the 1st of July rather than rush anything for the 30th of April. As I said, do reach out if, for those of you maybe have started or maybe a little bit further along and thinking, actually, I might be able to make this April window. If it's getting to the back end of April and maybe you feel you're 80-90% of the way there, but you're not all the way, do let us know. We are happy to flex these deadlines if you do make us aware that you're going to get something in not long after April, rather than having to wait the 3 months from there. Just in terms of, go on, Josie.
I was just going to say, although the window for applications closes, the website to upload doesn't. So you can still upload it, but know that it might not get picked up until the July window. But if it's within a few days, it might just sneak into that April one.
And then in terms of notifying you after you apply, so the window will close at the end of the month, and then the month after that we'll have our professional development committee, which meets every month. That's where we'll allocate out the applications to the assessors, and then we give the assessors 4 weeks then to complete that review. That will include reaching back out to candidates, getting that information and some of the stuff we spoke about. They then complete a recommendation form which comes back to the month after's professional development committee, in which we ratify the recommendation. So they will complete a form that says, I've reviewed this, I think it was great, let's admit them. And then a very simple version of what we do. And then after that professional development committee, you'll then be notified of your outcome, which at that stage I'm sure will be admit to register. Congratulations.
And that's the point, you'll be asked to pay your registration fee in order to go onto the register as well.
Yes, which, not to entice many of you, so at the minute it's £25 a year. It will be going up, I think, soon. I'm not sure if it maybe has already or if it's about to. It won't be going up by much.
No.
But at the minute, well, as far as I'm aware, it's still £25 at the minute. Okay, if there is nothing else from anyone, I hope that's been useful. And if you did have some questions, you've either felt the slides answered them or you've been able to ask them since. No matter what stage you're at, again, if this was the first time you've looked at it or whether you've already started, then hopefully we see your application soon. We've put all the links and videos and stuff in the chat, email address for any further questions. Lizzie's just dropped a feedback form if you all wouldn't mind completing that as well. It's just as we keep to look to tailor these sessions to make sure that they're suitable for people. So again, all feedback is welcome for how we can kind of constantly improve and make this process better. Right, I'll hand over to you, Josie. Any closing remarks from you?
No, I don't think so. There doesn't seem any further questions. Good luck. Give it a go. The only other thing I was going to mention that I didn't earlier, Mark, when you were saying about the assessors have a month to assess your application. If you've put in an application, you don't get contacted by your assessor, don't panic, because it might mean that your application is just fine and we'll assess it and pass it and you'll find out in a month. If you do get contacted by your assessor, they probably just want a little bit of clarification. So either way, it's nothing to be worried about whether you do or don't get contacted. It was just so that, for those that we don't contact, don't worry that yours has been missed or anything, because it will be in there. I think the recording, Shaheen, will be on the AFA YouTube channel.
So the link's at the top of the chat for that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Hope that was useful, and best of luck.
Yeah.